Good morning and welcome to this online discussion that's organized by the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies. Very good to have all of you joining us online today. 2022 will be the year of European defense. So announced European Council President Charles Michel in October. And this statement was influenced by the fact that we expect quite a lot of different things to happen in the field of European defense cooperation in the year 2022. The EU's forthcoming strategic compass will be adopted then. The EU will hold a summit on European defense sometime next spring. NATO will also adopt a new strategic concept for itself, which sets and outlines NATO's broad objectives and targets. And then we also expect there to be a new joint EU-NATO declaration that will be adopted sometime next year. So a lot is going on. That we have a lot of and multiple of these ongoing and planned European defense cooperation processes, but there's also a real need to develop European defense cooperation. I mean, if we just have a look at Europe's security environment, it has clearly deteriorated even further this year. We've seen hybrid attacks against Poland and the Baltic states that were organized by Belarus. Russia is again building up its military forces along its border with Ukraine. Europe also needs to do more for its own security as the United States continues to focus on the Indo-Pacific and no longer plans to wage two simultaneous wars at the same time in different theaters. New technologies are also creating new security challenges, as we saw earlier, like this autumn when China conducted a successful hypersonic missile test, which caused worries both in Europe and in the United States. And then also fairly recently, we saw that space has become increasingly securitized and it has become a domain for geopolitical competition as well, when Russia conducted another anti-satellite missile test, which created a lot of orbital space debris, which also created a temporary threat to the International Space Station. So given the ongoing and planned European defense cooperation processes and activities that are likely to take place and conclude in 2022, it's very important to discuss questions such as what will be the implications of the ongoing and announced European defense cooperation activities? What will they actually deliver? To what extent will they improve Europe's capacity to tackle the wide range of challenges and threats that it's currently facing? And will the EU become a more capable international actor by the end of the year of European defense 2022? So with me here today, we have three distinguished speakers to discuss these questions. We have Dr. Tom van den Kendeler, member of the European Parliament in the EPP group, who is also the chair of the European Parliament's delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, which seeks to convey the European Parliament's positions to NATO to further develop the EU-NATO relationship. Then we have Rear Admiral Jürgen Ehle, who is Senior Military Advisor in the European External Action Service, who advises the senior management of the External Action Service, including High Representative Josep Borrell himself, on all aspects of the EU's common security and defense policy. And prior to his current position, Admiral Ehle was assigned to as the Senior Political Military Advisor to Germany's EU Permanent Representation. And then we have Ms. Anna Wieslander, Director for Northern Europe in the Atlantic Council, who is also the chair of the Institute for Security and Development Policy in Stockholm and the Secretary General of the Swedish Defense Association. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being here today. My name is Dr. Nicholas Novaki, and I will be your pilot throughout this discussion today. And each speaker will have approximately 7 minutes to give their opening statements. And after this, we'll have an open discussion and a Q&A. So if anybody in the audience wants to ask a question, please post it on the YouTube live stream comment section, and then we'll do our best to take them from there. But without further ado, let's kick off the discussion, and I'll pass the floor immediately to Rear Admiral Jürgen Ehle. Admiral, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Nowacki, dear Niklas, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank, first of all, the Martin Center for having invited me to take part in this important event to discuss on the future of European defense. In her State of the Union speech, the President of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, devoted an entire chapter to EU security and defense. She will convene, as Dr. Nowacki already mentioned, together with French President Macron, a summit on European defense in spring 2022. In her speech, she mentioned EU entry forces, that we need to build the foundation for collective decision-making, that we need to improve interoperability, and that we cannot talk about defense without talking about cyber. Member states clearly would have to do more. The upcoming strategic compass, she concluded, is a key process of this discussion. After presenting the first draft of the strategic compass and the first round of discussions with member states, the EEAS is working on the revised draft of the document. The EU Military Committee provided a comprehensive military advice. Turning now to substance, let me briefly elaborate on the four main baskets or pillars we are discussing: act, secure, invest, and partners. First, act more quickly and decisively when facing crisis. The EU needs to be able to act rapidly and robustly whenever a crisis erupts, with partners if possible, and alone if necessary. Proposals to reinforce civilian and military CSDP missions and operations, to promote rapid decision-making, to ensure greater financial solidarity, to strengthen command and control structures, and to develop an EU rapid deployment capacity. And I can tell you this capacity is the star of this ACT chapter. An EU rapid deployment capacity, building perhaps on the basis of modified EU battle groups, consisting of flexible and interoperable modules that will allow us to swiftly deploy up to 5,000 troops for different types of crises, to enable the EU to deal with any crisis situation, to be able to act in all circumstances in a more efficient and faster way. Currently, the parameters of such a rapid deployment capacity are under discussion, and you may have heard in the press EU Initial Entry Force, EU Intervention Force, EU Entry Force. The term how this capacity will be named is not yet decided. The real question here is to have the right instruments to carry out a military operation and the capacity to act if the Council decides to launch an operation. Also, to make best use of possibilities, the Lisbon Treaty already provides specifically with Article 44, namely that a smaller group of member states should have the possibility to plan and conduct the operation on their own. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, the first decision will have to be taken by unanimity. Second, secure our citizens against fast-changing threats. In order to anticipate threats, the Compass makes proposals to boost intelligence capacities and reinforce our EU Intelligence Center to improve situational awareness and strategic foresight. We need to develop concrete policy toolboxes, like an EU hybrid toolbox, to prevent and respond to hybrid threats and to address foreign information manipulation and interference. And let me mention, Niklas did it in the beginning, Belarus. Here, clearly, migration is used as a weapon against the European Union. And I would like to recall what the President of the Commission just recently said. She said, in Belarus, migration is not used as a hybrid tool, but as a hybrid attack. So the strategic compass has clearly to deal with these issues to reinforce our resilience. Third, invest in capabilities and technologies. There's a clear need to invest more and better in capabilities and innovative technologies, fill strategic gaps and reduce technological and industrial dependencies. We also need proposals to better develop capabilities to deal with operational realities and seek common solutions to develop next generation capabilities. We should make full use of Permanent Structured Cooperation, PESCO, and the European Defence Fund to jointly develop cutting-edge military capabilities and invest in technological innovation. We have clearly to fill the gaps in our strategic enablers in boosting our defense investments and innovation in critical technologies. And I can say, in a nutshell, we always know very well what capabilities we need, but we don't deliver the capabilities we need. So this has to be changed via the strategic compass. 4, partner with others. Regional and multilateral partnerships should be reinforced through more structured dialogues and cooperation, notably NATO and the United Nations, but also regional organizations such as African Union, OSCE, and ASEAN. In this, NATO is key, of course, and a stronger EU in security and defense also means for us a stronger NATO, as the compass will also strengthen NATO, for example, through increased interoperability, more ready forces or new capabilities. Always remember, ladies and gentlemen, 21 countries are members of both organizations. And let me add this, because it was also mentioned in the introduction. The adoption of EU's strategic compass and NATO's new strategic concept offers a unique opportunity to further enhance coherence and synergies between the two organizations. We need to boost cooperation with bilateral partners that share the same values and interests, such as the United States, Canada, Norway, but hopefully also the United Kingdom. Our relationship with the US has a special place in this chapter. On this, I would like to briefly update you on the latest regarding the EU-US security and defense dialogue. In their joint statement of 3rd December, HRVP Borrell and US Secretary of State Blinken announced the launch of this dialogue. This is good news, as it is yet another deliverable from the EU-US summit. We are therefore looking forward to the first round of our security and defense dialogue in early 2022, with the participation of the US Departments of State and Defense and the European External Action Service, as well as the European Commission and the European Defense Agency. And of course, good US-EU cooperation will have positive impact on NATO-EU cooperation. I visited myself the Pentagon and the State Department from 1st to 3rd of December. US officials were very well prepared and focused on understanding and reinforcing the US-EU relationship, which was an administration policy from the President of the United States. And I can provide to all of you very, very positive feedback on the visit. Let me now briefly set out the next steps on the compass. We are already working, as I said, on a revised draft. At the European Council session tomorrow, our political leaders will discuss the compass and we will take their guidance into account in our next draft to be finalized beginning of January. After the Christmas break, we will have the informal meeting of defense ministers in Brest, and it will be very important that ministers have a discussion on the new draft. Our political leaders will also discuss EU-NATO cooperation at the European Council tomorrow. Let me very briefly touch upon the issue of the new third joint declaration on EU-NATO cooperation, given its importance for all member states. The European Council is expected to provide further guidance on EU-NATO cooperation and this new declaration. As explained by the President of the European Council, Michel, to NATO Secretary Stoltenberg, this is a needed step that will pave the way for the signature of this declaration. In terms of content, in our EES view, the new joint declaration should highlight our common vision on EU-NATO strategic partnership and convey a strong political message regarding the strength and solidity of the transatlantic bond. It should call for further deepening cooperation in the existing key areas, such as political dialogue, crisis management, countering hybrid and cyber threats, military mobility, and information exchange. And it should embrace new areas for cooperation, such as resilience, climate change and security, space, as well as emerging and disruptive technologies. So we expect, after being tasked by our political leaders, and I have no doubt at all that we will be tasked, that the new joint declaration will be signed by the end of January, beginning of February. This is my personal assessment. The European Council will revert to security and defense at its meeting in March 2022, when it will be invited to endorse the strategic compass. As it was said in the introduction, the President of the Commission will convene a summit on European defense during the upcoming French presidency of the Council. We don't know yet the exact date, as we don't know the concrete agenda. But for us in the EES, this summit provides an excellent political momentum for European defense. In our view, this summit should provide one defense package under the umbrella of the strategic compass. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude. With the compass, EU member states want the EU to take more responsibility for its own security. We want to strengthen the military pillar in the EU. The compass will set concrete objectives and timelines to achieve this goal. And by doing so, we should make clear that reinforcing our capacity to act autonomously and strengthening our relations with partners, in particular NATO, and now also with the United States of America, are two sides of the same coin, one that guarantees Europe's security. Of course, addressing the first draft of the strategic compass, some rushed to say that it is little ambitious or not perfectly focused. Some, as expected, went the other way, claiming it to be too ambitious or not realistic. But allow me to quote Napoleon Bonaparte, who once said, I quote, "Great ambition is the passion of a great character. Those gifted with it may perform very good or very bad acts. All depends on the principles that drive them." End of quote. In this sense, the EU has an opportunity to play the role it deserves in the global security scenario. I thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Admiral Ehle, for that excellent overview. I already have many questions in my mind. But before we jump into the questions, let me pass the floor to the other two speakers. And I'll now pass the floor to Dr. Tom van den Kendele, member of the European Parliament. Please, Tom.
Thank you, Dr. Nowacki, and thank you also from my side. Greetings from Strasbourg. Thank you, Wilfried Martens Center, for having me this morning. As the chair of the delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, you will allow me to make some comments precisely on the EU-NATO cooperation in that regard. I actually feel as excited as a kid right before Christmas when I look at the opportunity that is coming up for EU and NATO, as they are both conducting their own reflection and decision-making processes with a view to shaping their strategic objectives and orientations for the coming years. It really is a unique opportunity to foster a further coherence and cooperation between the two. And really, I would find it regrettable if the political leaders did not exploit all possibilities of cross-fertilization between the processes. As we know, the compass has four main pillars. Rear Admiral Ehle has just repeated them. You will allow me to focus on the fourth pillar, the partnering pillar, in which I'll explicitly focus on the EU-NATO cooperation, of which I think really it is one of the most important priorities of the EU compass. Now, when you look at the draft of the compass, what it says on EU-NATO cooperation is actually fourfold. First of all, and those are quite logical steps, but important steps, let's continue the close and mutually beneficial cooperation in crisis management operations. Think about Western Balkans, I think about Iraq. Let's also continue the cooperation in terms of military capability development, exercises, and military mobility. Second important element in the compass, let's enhance cooperation indeed on emerging and disruptive technologies, climate and defense, resilience, hybrid threats such as foreign information manipulation, securing cyberspace and outer space, and enhancing maritime security. We have seen over the past years that this is an increasingly important item, let's say, within our EU-NATO cooperation, and really we have no chance but to enhance cooperation there and enhance dialogue there. Third item in the compass on EU-NATO cooperation is about reinforcing political dialogue. And what struck me, or what I found interesting, is that also there should be joint public or more joint public communication based on increased exchanges on assessments of security environments. And fourthly, let's move from parallel and coordinated exercises to joint and inclusive exercises in order to address shifting geopolitical and technological trends. So with these four items in mind, really, I very much look forward to the debate of the European Council and the conclusions indeed on the first draft of the compass tomorrow. But as Rear Admiral Eyre stated, I also am confident that they will confirm the ambitious character of the compass. But the whole thing is obviously that there is no lack of good intentions among leaders. And the question is, how can we indeed make this cooperation as concrete as possible? So indeed, however necessary closer cooperation between NATO and the EU may be, there are a number of challenges which I think we will have to deal with to strengthen it. For example, one particular point I would like to take up on is the coherence between EU Article 42.7 on mutual assistance and NATO Article 5 on collective defense. That is but one key aspect on which I think indeed we have to make it more concrete and have to make our cooperation more concrete. So while referring to Article 42.7, the compass clearly states that we will continue to invest in our mutual assistance and solidarity, but let's be honest, there are still important questions there. For example, what kind of attacks should be taken into account? When and how could this mechanism be triggered? Until now, we have had one triggering by France, 2015, but that was actually really a formal triggering, if you ask me. How and to what extent should member states be involved? How explicit or implicit does it need to be? How quick or slow? And indeed, what about the role also of the involved European institutions or services? When do they come in? When do they play their role? So there is quite some open questions on Article 42.7, and a continuous point of concern is the coherence it has with Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. But I do think that this coherence that is constantly being brought up here and there should not be a fundamental problem. First of all, the treaty on the European Union explicitly states that Article 42.7 itself, that European cooperation always has to be consistent with NATO commitments, which remain the foundation of collective defense and the basis of its implementation for all NATO members. So in all, in general, the cooperation and consistency with NATO is always secured. Secondly, I would imagine there are more than enough conceivable scenarios of mutual assistance outside the core business or even the action radius of NATO. So Article 42.7 talks about obligation of aid and assistance in general, not about collective defense specifically. Thirdly and finally, I think really the time is right for focusing on the relationship between, on the one hand, Article 42.7 and on the other hand, Article 5 as a really basic element of strengthened EU-NATO cooperation we are heading for. So that is but one key aspect, I would imagine, of how we really need to make this EU-NATO cooperation more concrete in the months and years to come. And I share the ambition of those who have labeled the compass as ambitious but realistic, but really we should not miss the unique political momentum that there is, offered indeed by the ongoing decision-making processes in the EU and the NATO at the same time. And in that regard, Rear Admiral Eyre, you referred to it, I definitely also applaud the EU-US defense dialogue too. I think those are exactly the steps forward that we need to make it as concrete as possible. I wouldn't be a good European if I were not optimistic, but at the same time very cautious. We need to stay with our feet on the ground, obviously, when it comes to the strategic compass. One thing that comes to mind is how far can we go when obviously at some point the policy intentions will need budget. And if too many EU member states and NATO allies do already not live up to their budgetary commitments in NATO. Secondly, big concern to me is the question, how far can we go when a country like Turkey, which is a very important NATO ally, does have structurally a tense relationship with EU and the category rejects stronger European defense. Final concern or sign of cautiousness from my side, how far can we go if certain member states of the EU and that are also member of NATO, like Poland or the Baltics, openly demonstrate their reluctance with regard to strengthening European defense, because they would fear that such progress is impossible without weakening NATO. To conclude, I think I'm all but pessimistic. Don't get me wrong here. Ultimately, the advantage is that progress that we very much need will depend also on external factors like crisis, considerably deteriorating our security environment and leaving responsible policymakers without any choice. That isn't an ideal way of moving forward, but it definitely guarantees that progress will be made. There is definitely no lack of external factors like crisis that are deteriorating our security environment, if you ask me. Important too, EU and NATO do have similar, if not exactly the same, geostrategic interests, and therefore they should invest also more in common geostrategic analysis and positioning towards systemic rivals such as Russia and China. And I would like to conclude with one positive note. I think the joint visit that we saw of Secretary General Stoltenberg and Commission President von der Leyen to Lithuania and Latvia a few weeks ago, that very image was to me a very strong political signal which symbolizes close and strengthening cooperation between NATO and the EU. And really let us hope that this will be a supplementary impetus as well as for the running negotiations and the upcoming decisions among member states and the institutions of both organizations. Dr. Nowacki, I'll leave it there for my introductory remarks. I'm happy to give the floor back to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. van den Kendeler, for that assessment of EU-NATO cooperation and what could be done also when it comes to further developing Article 42.7. I think that's a very important point to also underline. I also have a lot of questions for you, but I mean, before we jump into them, I mean, let's first pass the floor to Ms. Anna Wieslander from the Atlantic Council. Ms. Wieslander, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Niklas, and thanks for inviting me and also to the Wilfried Martens Center for arranging this. I think when you proposed the topic, will 222 be the year of European defense, I felt I really wanted to join in, because I think I will join the choir in saying that I also, my sentence is that there is a momentum here on where we are heading. There is a lot cooking, as has been so well described here by previous speakers. So I think the question is rather, what kind of dish will be the result of all this going on? What will be the flavor of it? Will it have enough, spice, and will it be enough protein, I would also add, in order for it to be those kind of muscles that the EU and European defense really needs in order to take quantitative and qualitative steps ahead. So I would like to focus my remarks on two dimensions. One is the transatlantic dimension, which some have touched upon here, and the second one is the capacity to act for Europe. And first on the transatlantic dimension, since I think we have to start always and not forget that still ultimately it is the United States that guarantees the security of Europe still. And therefore there can be no credible strive, and I think the credibility here is really important, towards greater European responsibility or autonomy or sovereignty, whatever you choose, I think without the working together with the United States in some kind of agreement, this is a mutual interest across the Atlantic. And here, I think we have seen some progress actually, and some good signs. Jürgen mentioned here the EU-US dialogue, which will be an important first step. But there is a lot here. I think the Biden administration showed its positive attitude towards EU efforts by joining the military mobility PESCO project, really the flagship project of PESCO in the spring. You can compare that to the UK, which has not joined because they have doubts on the value of having this kind of project within the EU and so on. So I think you also have to acknowledge that the US is actually signaling here that the EU has an important role to play in building European defense. And that's important because traditionally or historically, there's often been moments when the US has been, on one hand, saying that Europe needs to assume more responsibility for its security, but on the other hand, being a bit grouchy, to be frank, and said that, well, you can't undermine NATO or indicating our positions. So this is a mind shift, which is important, which opens up for really constructive work ahead. Also, I believe the AUKUS alliance, when it was launched, it was a big storm, of course, across the Atlantic. But in its aftermath, we had a clear statement from President Biden in support of European defense, stronger, more capable defense, complementary to NATO. And France, on their side, promising during the presidency now that they will assume for European Union to keep the US in close consultation, a mechanism that hasn't always been working that well. We had Secretary of Defense Austin at the NATO defense meeting here in October also, saying that, I allow the EU to prescribe or outline the capabilities that they think they need. And I think that's a sign of putting responsibility also on us as Europeans. And all this is positive. Now, if I jump to the NATO strategic concept, which has been mentioned here also to be launched in June at the Madrid summit. I think what Tom has outlined here on EU-NATO cooperation, it needs to be mirrored also in that concept, the level of ambition and where we are on a range of very important areas on the hybrid spectrum, on cyber, also including space, as was mentioned. But also, I think I would like to see a recognition in this concept of the European pillar in NATO, which is what we are building actually here. Not an EU caucus in NATO, it's more of Europe, because you would also have the UK there, you would have Norway and so on. And this could be actually quantified ambition level-wise from a NATO perspective as well. Europe could provide 1/2 of NATO's current agreed level of ambition, for instance. If you look at the coming decade, being able to conduct of crisis management operations, 2 smaller ones or 1 major ones, for instance. You can set an ambition for this. And this pillar cannot happen if you don't have the big Germany, France, and the UK on board. So we will see how that goes, since across UK and France, things have not been that great lately. But still, I think there is hope to kind of shape this also to mirror the process that we now have within the EU. And then I would like to pick up on what Jürgen described here. If the EU has to go alone if necessary, or its capacity to act. And I really think that is an important approach, both when it comes to capabilities, resources, and political will, of course. And there I'm excited. Tom was excited about the partnership part of the strategic compass. I'm excited about what it says about the enablers, because I really think that is a critical thing for us to move forward on. You had the headline goal process and the operational needs defined, several of those. And the strategic compass saying that these initiatives, the initiative to substantially fill these gaps on enablers by 2025. Critical gaps, notably strategic airlift, space communication assets, amphibious capabilities, medical assets, cyber defense capabilities, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and I would air-to-air refueling, and we also have the command and control assets that we need. And if we can use the coming 3 years to achieve this goal of substantially filling, as the ambition is set up in the compass, I think we have reached a completely new level, actually, when it comes to European defense. Because this will also give confidence to member states to act without the United States, or in a new role with the United States if necessary. If we could really close this discussion, which started with interventions and missions we did in the Balkan Wars in the 90s, and then some new ones on space and cyber has been added, but some of them we have been discussing for many years now, and we know that we miss them. So if we can do this on the capability side, then we will still have the question of the political will. Will we still want to go ahead alone if necessary when it comes to crisis management operations in our neighborhood? And I wouldn't say that we will not, maybe, and there comes the discussions also on the articles and how we can solve this. So I think there will be more if we have the muscles, I think we will be more prone to act. But nevertheless, I think it's good investments, because these will always be useful, because if you then they will work to strengthen this European pillar in NATO. So also on the collective defense side, when it comes to deterrence, they will play an important role and be an important signal towards the adversaries that we see Europe has. And as you mentioned and has been mentioned, the security environment is very challenging for us. As we speak, Russia has mobilized some 175,000 troops along the border of Ukraine. In the worst case scenario, we don't know what that will mean for European security during coming months. So in order to stay secure, we must be able to speak and act from a position of strength. And therefore, I really think moving on enablers is so important. That will also give that protein I was asking for in this dish, if we talk about European defense as something that is cooking. And I think that we would take at least some very important steps towards being a more capable actor by the end of 2022. So I'll stop there and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Ms. Wieslander, for those remarks. So now we have about 20 minutes for discussion. And when I was listening to all of your remarks, I mean, all of you alluded to this momentum that we think that currently kind of exists in the European defense cooperation, which is also why European Council President Michel made the announcement that 2022 would be the year of European defense. But my question would be that what is really different now? Why is 2022 the year of European defense compared to other previous years? Because if we have a look at some of, especially every year since 2016 when the EU Global Strategy was developed, I mean, I think one could almost make the argument that every year has been the year of European defense, because we've had so many different developments, especially in the EU context. The global strategy was adopted, permanent structured cooperation was launched, the coordinated annual review of defense was launched, the new MFF was adopted, etc. So what is different now? And I think this would be an especially kind of valuable question to those who are listening, who might not kind of follow EU defense cooperation on a daily basis. So let's start with Admiral Ehle. Please, what do you think?
Yeah, you are completely right to ask this question, and I'm grateful for that. I think the European defense initiatives, as you rightly pointed out, started already in December 2017 when 27 member states signed the PESCO contract. But I still think that 2022 is a very special year. And my very short answer is it's a strategic compass. Because with this, we have a document which the aim of this document to set out clear objectives, a clear guidance, a new level of ambition for the European Union. And it is completely different to the recent years. Of course, we have the EU global strategy, but the EU global strategy is very, very broadly formulated. But with the compass, we have a document on the basis of this compass, we really can move forward with the clear guidelines and objectives. And this is different to the recent years. And I also want to add the engagement of the European Commission for European defense. And this is also new. It's not only that we will have a summit in spring together with President Macron, but we have also initiatives like the European Defense Fund. And it's the first time in history the European Commission provides money for European defense. It never happened before. And this is also new. And now the European Defense Fund comes into very positive actions. So this is also different. And 22 will be also a year when, you know, first measures of the Defense Fund will be clearly be visible. And I want to be too long, but we have also a third thing I want to mention, the compass, the initiatives like the Defense Fund. I would also like to mention the new financial instrument of the European Union outside the budget. It's the European Peace Facility. The European Peace Facility allocated 5 billion euros until 2027. And it is the first year the European Peace Facility comes into action. We now finance already equipment for military and civilian operations of the EU. And we support partners like the Ukraine, like Georgia, like Moldova. We just have assistance measures, allowed for the G5 Sahel and even for the special task force to fight Boko Haram, and also for the new training mission in Mozambique. So to strengthen the resilience of partners. And this is also very new and came already into action. And I think if I see all this together and also the political momentum, which has been pointed out, like what Michel said, okay, he's the president of the European Council. I think we should take this momentum now and to bring our defense forward. And we have now the United States on our side. Just one little remark. When I was 2 years ago in Washington at Capitol Hill, Pentagon and also State Department, they saw the EU defense initiatives as undermining the transatlantic relationship, as undermining NATO. And this has, with the new Biden administration, completely changed. And this is also a momentum we should use also for the benefit of good EU-NATO relations. Sorry for a little bit too long, but yes, 2022 is clearly for me a very special year.
Thank you so much, Admiral Ehle, for those remarks. Dr. van der Kandelaar, what do you think of the same question, but I would also kind of ask you to perhaps kind of reflect a little bit on kind of how the European Parliament will be involved in because we discussed about the strategic compass process, the summit on European defense, and these other processes. So what role does the European Parliament play these? And what can the European Parliament do to kind of influence and shape these processes and help make 2022 the year of European defense?
Thank you for that. First of all, who am I to challenge the thesis of Rear Admiral Ehle that next year will indeed be the year of European defense? I think there is definitely a case to be made for it. And my short answer would have been to the question that events, my dear, events is definitely also part of the reason why 2022 is very likely to be the year of European defense. When you look back at the past, 5 to 10 years, there has been a succession of events that really have forced us Europeans to realize that we need to change tactics when it comes to organizing our defense, our own defense of our continent. And there's a few things, obviously, more recently. Think about Afghanistan, think about Ukraine, indeed, think about Belarus that lead me to think that. But I also think of Brexit definitely in that regard too. The way in which the Brits were able to take care of our defense, at least to a great extent, that has fundamentally changed. By the way, we also will need to talk about the way in which we will continue our security and defense dialogue with the British after Brexit. The TCA really leaves still a lot of room there for interpretation and maneuvering, so that will be important. The second, or next to Brexit, the second thing I keep in mind really is Trump's coming to Brussels for the NATO summit. It isn't really obviously that very moment, but it is a very symbolic, or to me at least, it has been a very symbolic moment to realize that definitely this was the ending point of us being able to rely on the US as we have always done, even though obviously the message had already been put across in the past, for sure. So events, that is one thing. Second thing, processes both on NATO side and on EU side are going more or less in parallel. That is definitely something that is well catching our attention, whether we want it or not. And then, rightfully so, the question how the Parliament will try to get involved. Obviously, as you very well know, the Parliament has a very modest role to play in all of this. But as usual, we try to jump in here and there to have our voice heard. I think we're gearing up with a list of resolutions and texts to try and make our position heard. That is definitely one aspect where I think we will want to play our role. When it comes to me personally, I will also try to ramp up the cooperation we have between European Parliament and NATO parliamentary assemblies from different member states, different NATO partner states. Just precisely also because of accentuating the message that I have been putting across here earlier today. And last but not least, I see also a forum for the European Parliament and the UK Parliamentary Assembly, the new Parliamentary Assembly that there is after Brexit. I see a forum there for having a lively security and defense debate. I think we can play our role in all of this, but obviously a lot will depend on the way in which state leaders will take this forward. Ultimately, it will be in their hands, and we also have to count on them. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And then to Anna, like same question about 2022, but then perhaps you could also kind of tell us a little bit about like how these different processes that we've been discussing today, the strategic concept summit on European defense, how do they look from Stockholm? Like, are these something that on the agenda of decision makers, and are they visible in the media in Stockholm at all? Because I think it's important to also like get these perspectives from different EU capitals outside the Brussels bubble, so to say, to kind of hear how these are perceived. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think the momentum, I think that's a really interesting question, why it is so. And I'm coming back to what I started with on the US, because I think that's important in two dimensions. Both what Tom just said on the feeling among Europeans that can we completely trust the US? And there you have perhaps the shadow of 2024. Will President Trump return? What will happen then? But also, even if the United States would like to come, will they be able to come, or will they be distracted by developments in the Indo-Pacific and not have the same kind of resources that we would need to have? And thirdly, then, this shift, as also Jürgen described, and my assessment is the same, of the Biden administration being more open. And if they are more open, more EU member states, as the Nordic, Northern European, are also positive towards moving into European defense, because you see that, okay, there will be no conflict across the Atlantic. We are doing this together. That's an important signal also. So there's three dimensions here that are working towards this. But then so this has created a political will, I think, which is very tangible. But then you also need to have the investment in capabilities, and Jürgen mentioned the EDF, and I mean the fact that we now have European tax money moving into all of this. That's a very important shift, I think. But that's not enough. And I think the work that has been done within NATO since actually since Wales 2014, among most that are the same, and others like Sweden and Finland who are not NATO members, but we still assess the threat environment the same. So we are all increasing our defense spending or having ambitions or plans for that. That means that there is more money around and more to invest. And you also think about these issues, you think also about the new domains, the cyber, the space, the disruptive technology, as you mentioned, Niklas. So there is a lot that is going on that has started simultaneously, and now it's kind of seems to be coming together. At least we have an opportunity with all these processes to bring it together in 2022, and I think that's I feel more energetic about it than I have in quite some years actually. And then on the strategic compass and how broad that is in Stockholm, well, perhaps it's not. It hasn't got the attention it deserves to me a little bit. When you read it, it's actually it's pretty good. I think the roadmap approach, I really like it with the goals, and you can see what we really want to do compared to the, as Jürgen also did, the global strategy from 2016, more of a not a pamphlet, but more diffuse on what will we do then? This is much more hands-on. So I think in that perspective, this is really worthwhile, perhaps more attention than what it has received. So that there is some more outreach activities that we can do, I think.
Excuse me, Niklas, I just want to step in very quickly what Anna said. It was very good that you mentioned the Indo-Pacific and maybe the fear that the United States will focus more on the Indo-Pacific than on Europe. I can really confirm that we and the United States share a lot of interest in the Indo-Pacific, and working together in the Indo-Pacific to cooperate EU-US will also a topic of the dialogue we will have with the United States. I personally have the impression that we don't have to fear that we rather work together with the United States in the Indo-Pacific, as we have developed an EU Indo-Pacific strategy, and we also have very, very clear interests in that. And one word to the Brexit, completely right. We have a big gap, and we would like to see close cooperation with the United Kingdom in security and defense with regard to intelligence. But also, as an admiral, I miss the Royal Navy, the great Royal Navy in the European Union, their maritime expertise a lot. And I only can hope that we can cooperate with UK as a third state very closely together with. And as a personal experience, my UK partners here in Brussels, they all very much regret that the UK didn't join military mobility like the United States, Canada, and Norway. But there is a kind of disconnect between Brussels, UK, and London, UK. So thank you for coming in again.
Yeah, indeed, and like the EU finds itself now in this strange new situation in which it has a deeper defense relationship with the United States than it has with the United Kingdom, which is some bizarre in a way, because the UK is a former EU member state, helped to launch the EU's common security and defense policy with France, and participated in many missions. But times change. I want to also ask a question that was put in the audience, and that touches upon the proposed EU rapid reaction capacity of 5,000 troops, and you as well, Admiral Ehle, you stressed that it is not a standing force, it is a capacity, and the question is, how or what will make this rapid reaction capacity more deployable, or what will make the member states more willing to decide on using the rapid reaction capacity or the forces in its framework than the existing battle groups? So please, I'll start with Admiral Ehle.
Yeah, you are very right to mention the battle groups. The EU battle groups are clearly not a success story in the European Union, but I want to protect us as militaries, because it was always the lack of political will to deploy the EU battle groups. And now we are working on this rapid deployment capacity, and it's completely under discussions. As I said, the parameters are discussed, and we also don't want to invent something new. We want to build, on the good points of the current EU battle group concept. So therefore we use currently as a working term the modified EU battle groups. So what is under discussion now among member states for the strategic compass? A longer standby period. Now we have 6 months, so to extend it to 1 year. A longer deployment time, not up to only 120 days. Increased interoperability between the different modules making up the capacity. And also, and this is also very, very important for member states, a wider definition of the common costs of deployment to stimulate financial solidarity. Although here we have noticed that not all member states here are currently on the same line. So basically, the need for such a rapid deployment capacity is well acknowledged. But also here we have to talk, and Tom said it in the beginning, with the Eastern European countries. They still have the fear that a rapid deployment capacity in the European Union would weaken NATO, would weaken the Eastern European states, I say it very bluntly, in their defense against Russia. So we have also this in mind, and we have to find here and to negotiate here to bring the Eastern European, the Baltic states and Poland on board. This is also very under discussion currently. But I hope that we have this capacity, and it's not always 5,000. It depends on the missions. It can be 500, it can be 2,000. And also, how long should this force be in the area of operation? Is it a bridging force, and so on? This is currently under very intense discussion. So, and I hope that this discussion will end well, and that we, at the end of the day, have such a capacity for the European Union available. Thank you.
Dr. van den Kendele, like perhaps we can kind of just pick up from this. I mean, what could be done kind of in the context of the NATO EU, the NATO EU delegation, or the NATO Parliamentary Assembly, for example, to kind of alleviate this fear amongst some countries, which we still continue to hear, that some of these defense efforts could undermine NATO or duplicate what NATO is doing.
Well, thank you. I very well heard what Anna said about Stockholm and the debate not being very lively there over the strategic compass. And I think it is actually the case for many member states where this debate is not lively at all. If I see one task for myself as well, but also for the wider European Parliament, it is about creating this awareness for what is ongoing there, and basically clarify or stating the obvious, meaning stating what is already foreseen in the strategic compass today. And for example, on the rapid deployment capacity, the compass, I'm reading it out, is quite clear already. It says it is aimed at quickly responding to crisis situations by means of, for example, a rescue and evacuation mission or stabilization operation in a hostile environment. So if you look at this, it is not at all talking about a new standby force that would, go alongside NATO's response force. It is merely about actions in the field of crisis management, which I think does not undermine at all NATO's collective defense. So when I say stating the obvious, it is about reassuring again and again that basically the strategic compass is made and designed to be complementary to what is already existing at NATO, so as to create the trust and indeed to create the support that the compass will need to be a success. Thank you.
Ms. Wiesland, any final comments, like on these kind of same questions?
Well, I think the entry force was one of the news that reached Sweden, and we had I think a similar skeptical approach as the other countries mentioned here. But one of our concern is as I come back to the enablers, you know, is this a credible capacity yet for the EU? Our answer would be no. We still need to have more command and control and other things in order for this. I have worked at the Ministry of Defense, and when you sit there preparing the decisions to send those forces out, you know, you need to be able to see that this can work. This is intervention. This is you know, this is high end of the conflict. It's a complex situation, and therefore the United States has kind of guaranteed that. France has a similar way of thinking. So I think we need to build this step by step. But the ambition of being rapid and being able to deploy quickly, of course, that's very, very important in order to create the, you know, set the scene on the ground at an early phase. We would agree on that.
So thank you so much.
If I may, I want to make one point clear, also for the audience,
yes.
that this rapid deployment capacity will not replace the NATO's collective defense. It's a clear view of the European Union that NATO also in future will be responsible for collective and territorial defense in Europe.
Indeed, and that is extremely important to underline that what we are not talking is not a force that would be used in the European continent for the purpose of deterrence that would like try to take something away from NATO, but a tool for crisis management outside the borders of the European Union. And this is very important to stress. But unfortunately, all good things have to come to an end, including like this discussion. I really enjoyed having you here today, and I think kind of all of you stressed that there is something special going on at the moment. There is a momentum perhaps that we haven't had quite at the same level in the previous years, which could lead 2022 to become genuinely a real year of European defense, because the strategic compass process will conclude, and it will hopefully provide an ambitious roadmap for the future of EU defense cooperation. NATO will adopt a new, hopefully ambitious strategic concept, and then we will also have this summit on European defense, on which we hope to look forward to hearing more in the coming weeks and months. But thank you again to Herr Admiral Ehle, Dr. Tom van den Kendele, and Ms. Anna Wieslander for joining us. And thank you also to everybody who joined us online. And I wish you very happy holidays and a festive season. Bye.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Happy holidays.